thanks very much for coming today. You're very welcome at RUSI. My name is Dan Marks. I lead the Energy and Security Programme at RUSI. Just going to give some kind of short introductory comments, hopefully very quick, just as allow people to filter in and coffee to work and all of that kind of stuff as everybody wakes up. So we just to talk a little bit about RUSI itself. Basically, the presentation is just to kind of set the scene for the day. The goal of the conference, as I'm sure you know for being here, is to talk about clean energy industries, but really from top to tail, from the minerals through refining, and to talk about the risks associated with that, with manufacturing, all the rest of it, multiple different types of risk, from dependency, thinking about cyber, thinking about how these things interrelate with the need to decarbonize, with the need for secure, affordable energy, and all of the rest of it. So this presentation is just to kind of set the scene and present some of the kind of results of work we've been doing at RUSI as part of our energy and security program. We've got 3 papers coming out in kind of October, November, so it's kind of a bit of previews, some of that, plus just some of my own thoughts, which you can take or leave as you like. So, set the scene. I mean, what are we talking about with clean energy industries in this event? I mean, really, we're talking about multiple overlapping industries at all stages of supply chains to supply the equipment that we need and technologies that we need. So, I've moved away from talking about supply chains as much as possible because my personal feeling is that supply chains give an impression, something like oil and gas, that this is comparable. It's commodities, you're talking about that kind of suite of tools to deal with it. These are really industries. They're multiple industries, from mining and mining things that are not only for clean energy, through refining, through metals, heavy industries, precision engineering, very complex chemistry, all of that stuff. They're done in multiple different places. Each mineral comes from different places. They're processed in different places in some cases when it's not in China. And they're just generally more complex supply chains than in oil and gas, and certainly less mature. So for me, industries is the better way to think about this than to think of them as supply chains. Similarly, it talks to the fact that you deal with a lot of these questions through industrial policy, through trade policy, and things like that. Important to say that these industries are not necessarily clean in themselves. They may be, in fact, really quite highly polluting in some cases. I see a typo on the bottom line, so that's my fault. So yeah, that's kind of set it up. So the question, kind of to start things off, I think is, well, what do governments want from these industries in general? And this is my kind of assumption of what pretty much every government on the planet, whatever political background they're from, want. Effectively, 4 areas. You want supply. You want enough stuff, and you want it delivered when you need it. You want it to be cheap. You want there to be almost no chance of interruption, and you want it broadly, more or less, to be responsible business practice, whatever that means for you as a government. Everybody has their limits. You want economic opportunities for your country from the industries themselves. And I think one of the things that's quite often forgotten in that is that that's investment opportunities both at home and abroad. And actually, having, say, UK investors being able to access high growth markets is an important part of this. You want domestic value addition, you want to be doing stuff in country, you want employment. At the same time, you need these industries to deliver technological advances. You need them to solve your decarbonisation problems. You need them to improve their manufacturing processes to produce cheaper and more. You want them to use less stuff more efficiently. You want them to recycle so that you've got your own source of supply if you don't have primary mineral resources, and you want more effective extraction and processing. And geopolitically, you want the much maligned strategic autonomy. Nobody wants to be restricted by their reliance on clean energy technologies. Nobody wants to find that they are not able to do whatever it is that they want to do in the international sphere because somebody is holding some kind of clean energy dependency over their heads. Similarly, you don't want other countries to be dependent on on strategic competitors. So you don't want non-aligned countries to find that they are having to align with people who you don't agree with, and that is also a concern. So I think for me, they're the kind of 4 main areas. I'm sure there are lots more, but I think it's important to bear in mind that any kind of policy program that is dealing with these things has to deal with all of them. To a greater or lesser extent, you must always strike a balance between everyone. How much opportunity do you want in your country, and how much is that going to cost you? How much do you trade that against strategic autonomy, against your cost of supply? How do your trade policies and your onshoring affect the ability to develop technologies and innovation globally, and frictionless trade? So I think this is just, again, to kind of set the scene. So how can this be achieved? Well, I mean, that's what we're going to talk about today, so I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to take chair of the first panel privileges and ask everybody else difficult questions. But we could probably look at what the industries look like right now. So this is from work that we've been doing. It's kind of a variant on things that you will have seen before. So this is basically an index of products ranging from minerals all the way through to final goods in export markets, basically ranking a country's ability to disrupt supply chain for every single product and adding it up. So you end up basically by saying, well, China is very important, as you might expect, and really much more important than anybody else. And then, you have a kind of mix of countries. And I think the key thing to take away here is that if you look down that list, they're from a lot of different places. There's no one continent that's particularly dominant. This is also an overall snapshot. When you start to dig down a little bit, you find that it is quite different in different spheres. So mineral products, you can see that actually South Africa is by far the most important in our indices, actually. Australia follows, well, obviously China, Australia. Peru, primary lithium producers are slightly underplayed in this index because spodumene and such are not really discernible in HS code 6, so they're not included, only kind of lithium carbonate and the level above. So they're slightly underplayed, but effectively these are the countries that, if you are thinking about Chinese dependencies and those kind of things, these are the countries that China is dependent on. You can see that really you have problems across. China is at the top in metals, chemicals, and machinery. But your real problems actually in machinery and electrical. This is where you're producing your batteries. This is where you're producing your solar panels, your wind components, generators, and such like. China accounts for half of the index. So really a massive thing, and nobody is even coming remotely close to changing that. So if you're talking about kind of doing solar panels or even battery cells and such like, these are all coming in machinery and electrical, you have to overcome an absolutely gargantuan gap to start to achieve that. On transport, however, this is EVs and electric bikes. You find that actually China's reasonably behind, well, it's a long way behind Germany, is behind the US. The UK is not massively far behind, and Slovakia, Poland are the kind of car producers. So there's things around. Now, if you're asking, well, which countries are best positioned to deal with that, well, this is the same index, but adjusted for revealed comparative advantage. So in theory, where countries are more competitive, that's somewhat debatable in some instances, but also for proximate products, so products which have a similar revealed comparative advantage or chance of having revealed, basically products which are produced using similar production processes and therefore are expected that if you are already good at this, you're likely to be good at that. So these are the countries that could become more influential. And you see again, actually here, there is more chance. It's not such a negative picture. In metals, you have a range, and also you start to see different types of players come to the fore. You're kind of some more African countries, more kind of Southeast Asia becoming important. But again, the challenge is in machinery and electrical. The positive news in terms of wanting a more diverse industry is that in every single one of these indices, China's share goes down when you adjust it for comparative advantage, actually, which is not surprising because of kind of you're not competitive in everything if you have a highly integrated supply chain, except for machinery and electrical, when actually their comparative advantage goes up. So actually China is more competitive than it shows now, and has actually more growth potential probably than you see to dominate that part of the market. So these kind of just some thoughts to kind of get things rolling for the day. What are the implications? I mean, for me, the implications are that there are going to be lots of countries involved in diversifying these supply chains. If you look back here, not one single one of these indices has the same countries in the top 5, other than really China. Everyone, it's a different set of countries. Different parts of the supply chain need different countries. You need to be open. And these are not also European countries. And North America and Europe is not doing this on their own in any kind of affordable or competitive way. Different countries, different stages of the supply chain, and China is clearly going to continue to be leading this field for a long time. It's not necessarily a problem. The question is really, can you develop alternative supply chains that you can turn to? At least in my view, that's something that we can discuss. In terms of policy implications, I think what it says is, tariffs, non-tariff barriers, state aid, they'll play a role, actually. When you are catching up, and in this case, Europe and the rest of the world is catching up with China in terms of how to manufacture these things effectively, these are the policies that are usually deployed, like they have been across the world. However, if you do it badly, you're going to just slow the growth of slow diversification. You'll impact alternative supply chains in the most competitive regions. Most of those competitive regions are not in Europe and the United States. You basically strangle investment into them. You create barriers to trade. You increase your costs. You slow innovation, and you slow diversification from China, which is integrated and best able to deal with these problems. Outward investment is as important, or possibly more important, than inward investment from the West. You need to be investing in places that are actually likely to be competitive and where minerals are, and where the conditions for industry exist. And I think finally, just the super basic one that I think is actually, for some reason, seems to be quite often overlooked or not stated, which is that there's no reason to think that you're going to be good at something in clean energy when you're not good at it in everything else. Like, why, if you're rubbish at manufacturing consumer electronics and industrial equipment, why would you think that you'll be good at producing solar panels, which are consumer electronics, or industrial equipment, which is wind and other kind of technologies like that? Ultimately, you have to look to your actual industrial base. Are the conditions in your country supportive of investment into industry? If they're not, then either you've got to deal with that and make it attractive, or you're going to have to do it somewhere else if you want to do it realistically and have sustainable industries. They're kind of my conclusions, at any rate. So with that, we will go into the panel.